Hey everybody, my name is Jim Farmer. I'm the festival director of Out on Film. Thanks for joining us again this year. This is our 34th year of bringing you stories for, by, and about our community and its allies. This, however, is our first year as a hybrid festival, meaning we have a very limited schedule in theater. We also have a very robust catalog of films available virtually this year. And we also have some great interviews, including the one that we're about to do. The film today is Yes, I Am, the Ric Weiland Story. And joining us today is the director of the film, Aaron Bear.
Hello, thanks, Jim. Thanks for having my film.
Thank you for sharing it with us, and thanks for taking the time to talk about it. I really appreciate this. So I guess I'll start with my standard question. What made you want to tell this story?
Well, I was just wrapping up my first documentary, Finding Kim, and was already starting to think of what I was going to do next.
Okay.
And I was approached by a gentleman named Michael Fela, who appears in the film,
Sure.
after a showing at the Seattle International Film Fest. He had an idea of saying, "Hey, I have a friend, a dear friend of mine named Ric Weiland, who might suit for a really good documentary." And you're at a film fest, you're having all of these 3-minute conversations. And I said, yeah. And I said, email me. Well, he emailed me, and that was August of 2016. And he invited me over to his house, told me a little bit about Rick, and little did I know just how much research and it was almost like cracking open a cold case. Rick was an incredibly private person and wanted to be that way. But when I first sat down and with myself and thought, is this a story that I can tell truthfully, that I can tell in an authentic way? Is this something that I want to tell? And the further down the rabbit hole of Rick's life that I went, it just became clear that this was a story that I wanted to tell, that I needed to tell, that the world needs to know Ric Weiland and what his accomplishments were.
How much did you know anything about Rick before this? Before this thing?
I knew very little about Ric Weiland. I'm based in Seattle, so when he passed, I saw it was on in the Seattle Times, and when his name came up again for this documentary, I remember seeing that and kind of skimming that article. But no, I knew very little about him, which was incredibly exciting and scary to do a documentary about someone who is no longer with us and that I had never met before.
I mean, I'm sort of reading some of his accomplishments. He was a champion of gay rights. He gave to nonprofits. I mean, he successfully lived through AIDS. I mean, he was a groundbreaking presence during his time. But as you said, it's a little sad that not as many people know the name as they should.
Yeah, I always I've said along the way that Rick was a queer pioneer on so many levels, and you'll see in the film, it's like the amount of money that he gave away to champion causes is staggering. It's staggering. And a lot of people, a lot of billionaires and people with a lot of money, I would say, like, there's a bucket of them that never give any money away, and then there's another bucket that just champion causes that are close to their hearts. But Rick really did focus on a wide breadth of causes. But one of the things that I do focus on in the film, because I am a queer man, Rick was a queer man, are the LGBTQ organizations that he championed. To put it mildly, GLAAD would not exist today without Ric Weiland.
Okay. So, I mean, that brings us to the point. Why wasn't he, why did he have such a low profile then and now for someone who did so much?
That's a great question. It's something that Rick was such a, again, I go back to this, he was such a private person, and he didn't want to be known for his accomplishments or giving his money away. It was almost a very personal thing. I think someone in the film says, Rick would write someone a six-figure check and they would call to thank him, and he would just never return the call. So he was a very, like we can all be, he was a very complicated person, and and we all have duality in our lives, but he had many, to where he had this very personal life, this party life, this very business professional life, this philanthropic life. How does one deal with such a tremendous amount of wealth? How does one deal with all of the friends that are dying at the same time? So I think that he was taking in a lot of life changes very quickly. And I think the money part and the giving away and the recognition for it wasn't at the top of the list. I think he wanted to give his money away because he could, and he knew that he could make some sort of significant impact and change.
You worked on this film for 5 years, and as you were doing your research, I mean, Rick didn't seem to do a lot of any kind of public interviews. How hard was that during the 5 years of research, getting into this man when you weren't even able to hear him speak? And just, I mean, how hard was that?
That was one of the most difficult parts of making this film. And sort of, when you start a documentary, you have an outline in your head and of what it's going to look like or sound like. And Rick's life really threw me for a loop, because a lot of documentaries, especially about people, there's archive footage. There's them talking, there's them speaking. Rick never gave one single interview in his lifetime. And I scoured the earth looking for any footage of him that could help bring the story along. And the footage that I did find was just happenstance. He's not speaking in it. And obviously lots of photographs, but I quickly realized that, no one wants to, I certainly don't want to watch a documentary that's just talking heads about somebody. And so I, relying on the people who knew him and people who didn't know him but were impacted by him as well, but also having this idea with including animation and reenactments from his journals. And I should say finding his journals were such a momentous, paramount and key pivot in the making of this documentary, because I was kind of just feeling like, what do I do next? How am I going to tell the story? How do I represent Rick in the best light? And I got to go down to Stanford University, where all of his archives exist. All of his, after he passed, everything was donated to Stanford because he has this connection to Stanford. And I got to sift through some boxes, and there were daily journals dating back from 1975.
Oh, wow.
And I realized that this was his voice. This is him speaking. And I was very excited about it, but then how does one tackle that? And a daily journal from 1975 all the way up into his death. So then I had to get them digitized, and then I had to read them and reread them, and also pick out things that were important to his story, and how does that manifest in one's lifetime, and also how do I respect these journals? Because I don't know, I don't know if I would want anyone reading my journals.
Exactly.
But so I got to pick and choose what I wanted to use from those journals and use them in voiceover and in the reenactment, and it all came together.
Yeah. As you were going through all those journals and learning more about him, what are some things that surprised you?
Rick had a very interesting brain, is what surprised me. So he would write a journal, and then a year later, he would go back and color code his journals. So every entry that was it highlighted in blue had to do with Microsoft. Everything in green had to do with money. Red equaled sex and love. Orange equaled philanthropy. So I don't go back to my old journal. Sometimes I'll go back to my old journals and read something from 10 years ago, but he went back and color coded them. So to get that gives you just some insight into this very genius level way of thinking.
Hmm.
And um, that was one of the biggest things that had surprised me. But also, you know, even with this like genius level way of thinking, very, very much a human being with the same wants and needs and desires that even with a shitload of money, Rick still wanted so much too.
Exactly. Exactly. I mean, what comes across really well in the documentary is just how complex he was.
Yes, very Rick was very complex and very complicated, and everyone that I spoke to along the way, whether I interviewed them or not, was the constant theme was that they all said he was a very hard guy to get to know and a
Hmm.
very complex person.
Did anybody really? I mean, who else? I mean, who did know him the best?
I would say Mike Schaefer, his partner before he died, Ben Sharp, who was his partner for a very long time, and then in some way, Bill Gates
Hmm.
uh, knew him because they were, I mean, they met in high school, you know,
Yeah.
and you see, I got to go to Lakeside here in Seattle where they actually met and where this like, you know, the fact that we're sitting here communicating like this is because of Bill Gates, Paul Allen, and Ric Weiland. And it's kind of it kind of blows my mind a little bit to think that um, there was so much that Rick accomplished in his
Exactly.
time.
Exactly. Can you talk a little bit about his mental health issues?
Um, yeah, Rick. I mean, I think Rick suffered a great deal and wanted um, to figure out why, and
Hmm.
was always trying to find a solution. Was very solutions oriented guy. I mean, he was a scientist to a certain degree, so he was always trying to figure it out. But uh, I would say that there's still a huge question mark over the as to the why. You know, just it, whether it's serendipitous. I also started looking at my own mental health uh,
Hmm.
during the making of this film, and went through like some of the most challenging times in my 40 years on this planet. So, um, while making this movie about someone who suffered so greatly um, from mental health issues and also feeling just even not that was it was I feel for Rick and I like my it's like that's where there's so much of like me that's in this film um you know and there was just a lot of establishing trust with the people that loved him
Okay.
uh and and I never this story would be very easy to exploit and I
Sure.
understood that from the get and I wanted to for the people who were granting me access to his life I wanted them to understand that that wasn't the story that I was trying to make
Sure.
and but also shining a light on mental health too especially in the queer community because
Exactly.
it's been in the conversation I would say with you know the past few years like that's bubbling to the surface but something that has existed in our space for such a very long period of time
Exactly.
and that the conversation needs to continue.
Okay. During the 5 years that you did, try to find out who Rick was and do your research, would you say at the end of that time you had a pretty good understanding of who he was, or there were still some things that you just were a little unclear on?
By the time I finished the documentary I felt like I had a semblance of Rick
Okay.
and who he was but I don't feel like there was still I mean I could have made the you know the 10-hour version of this and continued to but it's like making a documentary for 5 years is an incredible amount of emotional energy and hard work and I felt like I had sort of like you have to call it at a certain degree and I want I mean I continue to like want to know more about Rick because he was such this hidden person. I felt like I
Sure.
got to get a glimpse of him from all different sides, from his personal life to his philanthropic life to his beginnings. So perhaps in a sense, like I got to know Rick in a very more well-rounded way than a lot of people actually got to know him.
Sure. You worked with some heavy hitters on this film. You worked with Fenton and Bandy or World of Wonder. Wes Hurley produced this film, and then Zach Quinto narrated this. How were you able to get all those people involved with this?
I kind of I joke that, but it's also kind of not a joke. Like I got to work with like a gay dream team.
Yeah.
It started with Wes and have been dear friends for a very long time, and we've helped each
Okay.
other out on stuff. And Wes was in this from the beginning. Fenton and Randy, I had worked on a web spot for them about sort of the afterlife of these two refugees here in Seattle named Naif and Batu. And through that, we just became friendly. And I had asked them if they would be interested in executive producing, and they said yes. And
Okay.
then I was down in LA in their office, and I think it was Fenton or Randy said, "Wouldn't it be great to get an out gay actor to do the voiceover?" And I said, "Yeah, that would be awesome." So I went back to my hotel and I just made a quick list, and uh, Zachary Quinto was at the top. And somewhere along the way, somehow someone just randomly emailed me and said, "Hey, he might be interested." And then it was lots of agents and paperwork, but in the end, his agent said, "Write Zach a letter." And because I had never met Zach before,
Sure.
but I've always loved his work and loved his voice. And so I wrote him a very, in my opinion, heartfelt 1-page letter of like why I think he would be perfect for Rick, and the fact that Zach is an out gay actor, uh, and I love and adore and appreciate Zach so much for doing it sight unseen during COVID. And so he said yes. And I went down to LA and did the voiceover work in 4 hours. And that was that.
Nice. How
Yeah.
different, kudos for that. How different would you say your first documentary was from Yes I Am?
Finding Kim was incredibly different from Yes I Am because, with Finding Kim, I was following somebody around day to day. And sometimes there's not shit happening in someone's life. And sometimes they're just like waking up. And so I was trying to really I wasn't, creating these like fake situations,
Yeah.
but also there were these pivotal moments in Kim's life that I was trying to focus on. And when I finished, I was like, that was the hardest thing that I've ever produced, ever directed, ever done. And then I started Rick right after, like not even 2 months after I finished Finding Kim.
Okay.
And it was so different because this was somebody again I had never met, someone who is no longer with us, and having to create a foundation and a story of who he was, and comparatively to Kim, it was wildly different.
Okay. So as we wrap up, Aaron, what is next for you in terms of future projects, and what is next for this documentary?
In terms of next for me, I'm working on a TV show called There's a Light That Never Goes Out, based on growing up queer in Milwaukee in the late 80s or the
Okay.
90s. I am also working on a film based on true events. I can't really say a lot right now, but it's about one of the first cases of AIDS in small town Texas in 1983. And working on finding financing for that. I have scripts for both. So, finding the money is always one of the most challenging parts of what we do as independent filmmakers. But also when you do find it, it's so literally rewarding. Um, so those are the big two. I also do a lot of commercial work to help pay the bills.
Okay.
And so I'm continuing to do that. And next up for Yes I Am, after Out on Film, is the Bushwick Film Festival, and then the Newport Beach Film Festival, which is coming up at the end of October. So I'm going down to Newport
Nice.
Beach in about a month for
Nice.
that. So, and then of course the Seattle Queer Film Festival next month as well. So it's a little bit of a, not a little bit of a hometown show. It's a huge hometown show. So Ric's people are going to be here, and everyone who helped me work on the film will be here to help celebrate the release of the film.
Congratulations. That's very exciting.
Thank you so much, Jim.
Yeah. The documentary is Yes, I Am, the Ric Weiland Story, directed by Aaron Bear. It's one of the great documentaries we have this year as part of Out on Film. Aaron, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today.
Thank you so much, Jim.
You have a great day.
You
Thanks
too.
so much.